Hello and welcome back to the Nasty Metal Production channel here at YouTube, and welcome to another album of the week. This is episode number 117, and since I pretty much had announced what was going to be this episode's album pick, again on the very end of episode number 116, which was for, of course, Fire Unknown Origin from Blurs to Cult, and since we are here for episode number 117, and you can see the artwork and the title. It is the, of course, who knows that this is probably brand new to you. Again, the debut full-length album from a very obscure new wave or British heavy metal band. It is Direct Line from Dedringer, which apparently it was unknown for whenever, at least to me, it seemed like it was almost unknown. Or very, very difficult, really, to kind of almost pin down when this album was actually released in 1981 as far as the month is concerned. However, just looking on Wikipedia just right now, apparently it was originally released in February of 1981. So, and again, through Dindisc Records. Therefore, it has already reached its 40th anniversary. But you know what? It's better to at least talk about it now than kind of shoehorn it into at least February, and at least it was probably better than me trying not to shoehorn this album into February, given there was plenty of other good albums or better albums that was released at least around February of 1981 that was probably more worthy of, you know, just discussing about in February of 2021. So, but still, it is here. Alright, so, Dedringer. Since I don't know how many of you who are, obviously if you're subscribed to my channel, you must have already be just overall fans of, or at least are into anything the new wave or British heavy metal movement related, you know, the whole NWOBHM shit, you know, everyone is just, you at least should be into that and stuff, you know, or at least collect anything that was released from that era, you know, anything that's related to bands like either Iron Maiden, early Def Leppard, Saxon, Tigers of Pantang, Raven, you know, and yada yada yada, and just those kind of bands into that stuff. So if you are, then you probably are aware of Dedringer and some of the albums that they released, especially their second album, Second Arising, which was their last album, and I'll probably get into that maybe at some point, maybe during the end of this video. Still, though, that album was released on, well, the legendary Neat Records, but this is their first album, which was released through the very somewhat, I guess maybe at one point it was probably considered a more respected label, I guess, in the UK, which was Dindisc, but it's still, nowadays, Dindisc, if you were to bring up that name to anybody now and be like, what the fuck is Dindisc Records? Nobody would know now. But they were assigned to it. So, before we really get into their releases or anything, you know, their debut stuff and whatnot, let's definitely go into the backstory, since I've got Wikipedia up, which actually apparently has a history right up here. So, originally titled Dedringer, which was because of that they changed it differently, which was always a norm for a lot of new wave or British heavy metal bands to somewhat wrongly name or title the names or whatnot. You know, spell it incorrectly. I mean, Tigers was spelled with Tygers instead of Ti. So originally, though, Dedringer kind of did this a little bit. They had it spelled correctly when they originally formed, because again, with the dead being, of course, spelled correctly here, originally with D-E-A-D, but eventually they switched it to, of course, D-E-D-R-I-N-G-E-R, so incorrectly spelling the name, which again, there was a point where, and I guess depending on the audience and whatnot, who wants to get into that, wants to coming up with band names to be like, oh, that'd be so cool, you know, that thought that was very cool to do incorrectly title their name differently, you know, whatnot. Still, anyways, Again, originally formed in the late 1977 as a cover band in Leeds by, of course, Johnny J.J. Hoyle, Neil Hudson, Al Scott, Lee Flexington, and Kenny Jones. Of course, they built up a core grassroots following throughout 1978 and came to the attention of Virgin Records through the A&R man who decided to manage the band when Virgin failed to sign them in 1980. They then, of course, signed to the pop and new romantic label Dindisc and issued their debut single Sunday Drivers, which is a great sort of 7-inch actually. Of course, if the B-side is a track that didn't get re-recorded for their debut full-length album, or probably any album in general, which was titled We Don't Mind. Again, that was the B-side. So that was in January. So in January, the band toured the UK with the likes of Praying Mantis, Gillan, Triumph, the Canadian band, and the Michael Schenker Group. So, finally, in February of 1981, saw the release of Dedringer's debut album, Direct Lines. So this is finally, we are here at the full-length album here. Alright, hopefully I didn't beat around the bush so much. If I did, I apologize. Still, certain things are not always my strong suit. But either way, we're finally here at the debut album. So, this album, of course, was produced by... let me kind of bring up my record here, because of I have it on record. I have an original Dindisc Records pressing, which was actually sealed, after all these years. It seemed like it was sealed, and it has, of course, like a logo form of some sort, actually, like a little insert with the logo, and where to at least order a logo patch, whatnot. It's actually really cool. Either way, here we go. Produced by Mike Howlett and engineered by Richard, I hope I'm going to say this correctly, his last name, but Manwaring. Richard Manwaring. Manwaring. He man-wears. He wears man. Yeah, so that's his last name. Alright, goofed around with that, joked with that. Okay, so Mike Howlett. I guess if you were to bring up Mike Howlett's name to anyone who probably lived the 1980s, especially in the US, if they ever bought the particular record that I'm going to mention, they probably would have seen his name on the back of a particular record, that being A Flock of Seagulls. Yes. Mike Howlett is probably best known for producing the very first A Flock of Seagulls record, which of course contained their probably the only big hit the band ever put out, that being Iran. So that's what Mike Howlett is best known, and he is the one that produced Direct Line from Dedringer here. Yes, a band part of the new wave or British heavy metal movement. Yeah. Okay. So there we go. We got that little information out. So let's definitely get into at least the songs for this album and as far as its time length. It's not a very long record actually in terms of its length. I mean, it's about 8 songs here, but thing is, it actually clocks in somewhere. Let me bring up here because I did a vinyl rip. All right. Actually, you know what? It is a pretty little longer record. I was thinking 33 minutes, but it's 38 minutes and 6 seconds here because I did a vinyl rip of this one because again, so I can listen to it in my car or my CD player or in my computer instead of just on my turntable. Alright, so the 8 songs here are, let me bring up the record here. Direct Line, She's Not Ready, So Still, Maxine, which then became a single all its own, more like I guess it was a 7-inch, but it might have been a 2-record 7-inch. Basically, double 7-inch. Then, of course, for side 2, High Stool, Sunday Drivers, which was the first single they ever released. First Class Tonight, and then Runaway. So, there's your 8 songs. So, Direct Line from Dedringer. Since these guys were never really a premier band for the new wave or British heavy metal movement, basically the NWOBHM, stuff, they weren't a premier band, even though they did kind of play with at least the most notable bands from the new wave of British heavy metal movement. They just never really saw the same success as like a Def Leppard or a Tigers of Pantang or even at times a Raven or a Saxon or even especially an Iron Maiden. They never saw that same success. And I guess there is probably some truth to it because of on this first record here, it's not the most amazing thing in the world. Even though there's some quirkiness to it, there's actually almost a charming thing going on here. But at the same time, it's not really bad. I mean, to kind of bring up some quotes here, because Wikipedia has some quotes from fucking Eduardo Rivadavia. I hope I didn't fuck his name up, his last name. You know, I don't really care for the fucking guy anyways. I think he's a fucking amateur fucking reviewer over at AllMusic, who probably would know a good record anyways if it fucking if it was in the size of a goddamn anvil and fucking crashed his home, or even a fucking too big truck. Still, or again, a fucking semi. Still, he might have some points here, because again, he's quoted for saying fairly innocuous, hard set. I don't know what the fuck that even completely means, even though it probably is a more of a, I guess, poor way of saying that it's not a very good record, whatnot. And of course, Martin Popoff basically gave the album a 6 out of 10 and pretty much summed it up as a memorial to non-threatening pub rock, absorbing all the non-achieving affections of those who slogged the wee stages before them. Yeah, that was his quote there. I think, if anything, that's a little, probably kind of harsh. And then again, Martin Popoff at times can come off a little bit too pretentious in his summonings or assumptions of any album to begin with. But at the same time, there's probably some points. I actually don't mind this record. Again, I'm going to be very honest with you. I don't think this is the worst thing ever to come out of the movement. It's not the most amazing thing, but it's not anything that really set anybody on fire. At times, I almost roll my eyes at a lot of the folks that every time I would search up some of these songs on YouTube and I look in some of the comment section, I would see some people saying how fucking Dedringer actually blew Def Leppard off the stage and play in most parts. I guess, again, there probably was a point, at least a point in history where Dedringer actually shared the stage with a very young Def Leppard. And I can make a lot of comparisons to Def Leppard here. To me, the way to sum up Dedringer's sound on this particular album here, even though it's not that it completely changed after this, but really, for this particular album alone, they were definitely like a more or less, just a more really lightweight Def Leppard, but combined with Mama's Boy and whatever characteristics of Vardis. Again, because they have that boogie rock thing going on, but it's not nearly done as tight or as infectious as the guys, like Steve Zodiac and Vardis. It still has it's got a charming feel, though, at the same time. I can almost appreciate this. It's it's very lightweight, but it's not bad. Again, to really make some examples, I mean, for songs like maybe Maxine and Sunday Drivers and First Class Tonight and even She's Not Ready and Runaway are probably definitely one of the more, probably the best examples of this sort of way of really combining the sort of almost melodic nature of either, for example, Vardis or Def Leppard and Mama's Boy, and there actually are one of the better songs on here, but there's some interesting ones. They do play around with some more straight up bluesy stuff here with the song like So Still, which is a fine song, but it's not really my favorite off the album. Same goes for like High Stool, which actually is interesting, but again, they do play with almost semi-ballady openings on this one. But at the same time, I think that might be one of the downfalls of some of the album. But again, of course, First Class Tonight is kind of close to really doing that. But I think it's one of the better ones because it's got a little heaviness. It's probably the closest to more of a straight up heavier rocker. But there still isn't enough. Again, I don't. It's a quirky sort of album. It's a little at times jarring, but it's not bad. And even when it comes to the vocals of, let me bring it up the record here. J.J. Hoyle, his vocals are like a more. There's some similarities to Joe Elliott of Def Leppard, but he's a little more higher pitched. Almost it makes me wonder if fucking Joe Elliott maybe might. Then again, he might have heard them and probably thought that's what he wanted to sound like because of. If you listen to High and Dry, which came out at the same year as this album, and then this album, because again, fucking Joe Elliott on Through the Night. He sounded different on that album than he would on High and Dry, and I'll be at least talking about High and Dry from Def Leppard. But if you've ever really, you could tell whenever you were familiar with those two albums, you know how Joe Elliott's vocals has changed. And the thing is I always thought again because since High and Dry had this sort of almost AC/DC sort of influence, I mean, Mutt Lange. It made you wonder if he was trying to copy, either Bon Scott or Brian Johnson. But listening to Dedringer and how J.J. Hoyle's vocals are, and how very screaming almost in some ways. He's got a very just a high, screechy kind of, or very raspy sort of tone to his voice. It makes me wonder if Joe Elliott was trying to copy him instead of really, for example, Brian Johnson. It's just very different. They almost have a similar vocal style, almost. It's almost uncanny in ways. But again, Def Leppard is probably the better band, really, than Dedringer. But at the same time, at least Dedringer at least split up before they got any worse. So there we go. Still, I can't say anything completely terrible about the album. It's just that it's not the most greatest thing on the earth. It's not the best thing to come out of the new wave or British heavy metal movement, but it's not the worst thing to come out of the movement. Again, there's probably far worse that came out of the movement than this record. It's just more of a very good sort of background kind of album, one you can throw on. It's fun in some places. It's not going to completely shatter your entire house, but it's not going to completely, make you feel insulted while listening to it, or almost, I guess the best way, feel guilty of listening to the album, or almost feel like, man, why am I listening to this record? It's not that kind of bad. It's just, it's all right. That's all. Again, I don't think it's deserving of sort of for me, in my opinion, the negativity from, of course, Martin Popoff or those kind of guys. It's not really deserving of it, but it's not deserving a whole lot of high praise. It's just a fine sort of, boogie sort of record to come out of the new wave or British heavy metal movement, and it's just there. But again, I can listen to it just fine, and and listen to it again. It's not going to be a completely go-to record, but it's not bad. So that's all I can say there. It's just a fine record that kind of plays things somewhat safe, but that's because of there's a little bit of honesty. There's at least some sort of sincerity coming out through some of the album to me than really the most other bands then around this time that was trying to somewhat force in the sort of booginess because of they have to play the pubs. But again, it does have a pubby feeling going on, and I think it's enough to where I find it charming. So, and jarring, whatnot. It's just a fine album. Again, plenty of good rockers still. That's all I can say. Probably, my least favorite might have to be the title track, but it's still it's just a fun record to put on. That's all. That's all it is. It's a fun throw-on kind of record. The album, however, sold enough to gain the band a set on the Friday Rock Show, But following the release of the Maxine EP in April of 1981, strifes between the band and their record label and serious car accidents suffered by Hudson and Scott led the band to call it a day. That only lasted until the year later when Hudson, Scott, and Jones reformed the band again in 1982 with new members Neil Gerfitt and Chris Graham. They signed to Neat Records and released their new single Hot Lady in November of 1982, and of course finally releasing their second full-length LP, Second Rising, in January of 1983. So, then of course after that, but after some final lineup shuffling, diminishing fan interest led Dedringer to disband in 1985. So okay, there we go. That's pretty much it for this band. So, since this album again, it's reached its 40th anniversary, even though I don't know how many of you would have been around the time when this album was released, or you even were aware of them in 1981, especially if you were living in the UK at the time. If you weren't aware of them, again, I'm not going to go on, and that means I won't go any further saying that then what are your memories of when this album came out, because again, it's a fairly obscure kind of record. So, but if you did at least listen to this album, or are aware of the album and probably bought it because of it was released a part of the new wave or British heavy metal movement, if you did, what are your thoughts on the album? Whether, again, if they are good or bad, you can leave them in the comments section below. But if you're not familiar with Dedringer, again, if you want a sort of look into the more non-heavier bands of the new wave or British heavy metal movement, because again, to be quite honest, the whole new wave or British heavy metal movement was not really filled with a lot of heavy, hard-hitting bands. Some had their charming sort of quirks to them, or aspects and whatnot to a lot of those bands, but at the same time, some of them were not always the best. It was again, it's probably more of a 7-inch blown up to a full album. But again, if you are just interested in checking this album out, I don't think you're going to be doing yourself any wrong in doing so. I don't feel like you're going to be this guilty of listening to the album. It's just that if you're looking for something that's going to blow your socks off, it's not that kind of record. But if you just something, that's for nice to throw on, that is part of the new wave or British heavy metal movement, that's again might be second or at times maybe a good third tier kind of record. I think it's not bad. I don't think you'll do yourself any wrong with checking the album out. Again, it's very easy to buy online. I bought this off of Amazon, actually, and it was a very cheap at the time. Very cheap. So it's not a very tough record to get a hold of. So at that's pretty much ends episode number 117 of the Album of the Week. So, what is going to be next week's Album of the Week, that being episode number 118. What's going to be the album for that video? Well, it is going to be another obscure record. And it's one of my personal favorite really obscure German metal records. It is the debut from Rampage. It is Victim of Rock, or Victims of Rock. I think it's Victim of Rock. But good album. So that's going to be next week's Album of the Week video, again, for episode number 118. So that, I hope you enjoyed episode number 117. Hope you all enjoyed this one. So with that, this is Heavy Thrasher saying I am out. And I'll see you all later. Take care, everyone.